Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Monday afternoon briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined as always by Patrick McPartlin. Here to look back over Aberdeen 2, Hibs 2 at the weekend, and obviously look ahead to what's coming up for Nick Montgomery and his team. Just before we kick off, though, I'm just going to jump right in with a absolutely shameless plug for our newly launched Hibs Observer app, which you can download on Android and iPhone. It's free for current subscribers, and in our admittedly quite biased opinion, it's well worth taking a wee look at. We do feel it is going forward. It will be the best way to access all our content. It does look good, and it you know just a kind of one-stop shop for everything Hibs Observer related. As I said, everything that we put on the website will be on the app, and you can access it through there. It just makes it easier to access things on the go as well. So if you haven't already checked that out, then please consider giving it a wee look. We really would appreciate it. And if you have already downloaded it, then just a quick thank you for that. Again, it is much appreciated by us, and it helps us bring our work to you in the best way possible. Thanks to everybody who's already taken a wee look at that. Patrick, I suppose we need to start by looking back at Saturday's game up at Pittodrie, 2-2 draw with Aberdeen. Again, it's not the elusive Premiership win that Hibs have been craving for quite some time now. I think we've really quite often touched on the fact of how long it's been since Hibs got a win on the board in the league. But then obviously there's the context that getting up to Pittodrie is never an easy task. So just kind of having been up there yourself, had a couple of days to stew on it and digest it. What do you make of the overall result and performance?
I think there's a lot to unpack from it. I think you're quite right when you say, sort of out of context, the point that Pittodrie is not the worst result, because when you consider some of the scorelines up there in recent years, I mean, Hibs went, what was it, 10 years without getting a win up there, and granted there were a few championship seasons in there, but even so, that's still quite a long time. So out of context, I think a point is not the worst outcome from what's somewhere that's been traditionally difficult for Hibs to go in the past sort of 10, 15, 20 years. But I think when you look at the sort of season that Aberdeen are having, and you look at the season that Hibs are having, especially over the last sort of few weeks, I think it did become a little bit, in that context, it's maybe a bit more difficult to take for fans, because obviously I think a defeat would have been disastrous. I think that could have been really, that could have really been alarm bells ringing, everyone to the lifeboats. But I think a win would be ideal, and absolutely adamant that this is not going to turn into another sort of 45 minutes about VAR and the ins and outs. But, if Hibs had got that penalty award in the first half, when Nicky Devlin appeared to handle the ball from Jordan Abita's cross, and Hibs had scored that penalty, then maybe you get a totally different game. It's you can sit here and say that, and but again, if Hibs weren't so kind of struggling to think of a suitable adjective, but if Hibs weren't completely kind of self-defeating in defence at times, I mean, some of the defensive work on Saturday wasn't just bad, it was sort of like catastrophic. And I mean, I know that's kind of what we've come to expect from this Hibs team, and to be fair, Aberdeen were doing a fair bit of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time, I think, shortly after Aberdeen had scored, and I think Hibs had another chance, and you just thought this could actually end up 4-4, 5-5. Because both teams, I think, the strength obviously lies in their forward line, and defensively, let's not kind of dwell on that too much. But yeah, I mean, a point's better than nothing. Obviously, a win would have been ideal. But the sort of bigger picture of it is, as you were saying, Hibs haven't won a league game since December the 9th. It's 3 points from 24, which is, I think, if you care to look at the statistics of previous managers, is not great for Nick Montgomery. But what I would say is that I think the performances have kind of kicked up a gear since he made some of those signings in January, since he's got the likes of Martin Boyle, Lewis Miller back from international duty, and also guys coming back from injury as well. So I think if you're the sort of happiest of happy clappers amongst the Hibs support, you might think there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, which isn't actually a sort of oncoming train. But I think it does be, I think it is concerning that 3 points out of 24. Granted, they have played like Celtic, they've played Rangers, they've played St Mirren, who are obviously having a good season. Played Kilmarnock again, another team currently above them in the table. But you look at how many shots Aberdeen had compared to Hibs on Saturday. You think there could have been a bit more out of it. And it did look at one point that Hibs were kind of playing for the draw a little bit, and I can understand you don't want to maybe go gung ho and risk losing. Like a point's obviously better than nothing, but I did think there was a point towards the end where it did look as though the Hibs were kind of just satisfied with the point when other teams, managers maybe might have been going hell for leather to try and nick a late winner and go back down the road with 3 points. But what it does do is it makes Saturday's game against Dundee all the more important. I mean, it's going to be a big game anyway. I think it's even bigger now, and I think there were promising signs. There's been promising signs in the last few games, whether they've been league games or cup games. But I think what Hibs need to do now is they need to turn those good bits into like a properly rounded performance, take their chances, not shoot themselves in the foot in defence, and you just sort of think if they get a win, if they get a league win, they get 3 points. It's just going to be like a massive weight off the shoulders, you would hope, and that they've come close. Obviously, they were close to getting a result against Aberdeen. It doesn't feel too far away, and they've obviously had the victories against victory against Inverness, I suppose, is the one he's looked at in the cup. So I think it's just about taking the good bits from the performances and just trying to put them all together in the hope of actually coming out with 3 points. Which I think Montgomery needs 3 points. I think the fans need 3 points, and the players need 3 points. And to be honest, we need 3 points, so we're not talking about the same game. I think, an okay point. I don't think you'd be raving about it. I think the main thing was not losing. But like I say, I think it would have been nice to see them maybe going for it a bit more than they did. Obviously, Montgomery hamstrung a little bit by having the enforced change of David Marshall maybe affected what he was able to do with the second half substitutions. But we will talk about this later. But second game in a row that Vente doesn't get on at all. Mm-hmm. And for the side, obviously Hibs do score goals, but someone like him maybe coming on might have given him something different in the last few minutes when they were searching for a potential winner, or if they were searching for a potential winner. But done and dusted, and I think you look ahead to Dundee now and try and stamp out the bits that went badly wrong at Pittodrie and build on the ones that went well.
Yeah, absolutely. Montgomery, I think he did quite a few times afterwards just used the phrase "we move on." But yeah, I agree. It was an entertaining game, but I think that was catalysed and quite significantly by the fact that neither side really covered themselves in any glory, trying to keep the ball out of their own net, which obviously makes for an entertaining game for the fans. The managers might beg to differ on that slightly. It's the best possible start for Hibs. I felt there was nothing too much in the kind of opening exchanges. It was two teams sort of feeling each other out, and then the goal just underlines that there are guys in that forward line now who can turn a nothing moment into something that's really good work by Mizian Malida to play on Martin Boyle. And then obviously he does extremely well to keep his composure, get around the keeper and slot it away. But it must just be so you're kind of tearing your hair out as a manager to then be pegged back so quickly and doubly so. And I'm sure this was the case for the fans as well. It was that kind of same type of goal that we're seeing Hibs concede an awful lot. It's that second phase from a set piece that they just don't seem to be able to deal with it. It was the from what I remember, the initial free kick doesn't even get as far as the box. I think it was blocked by the wall.
Blocked by the wall, but then Hibs had 2 or 3 chances to sort of clear it and sort of failed with each one. And that's it's a set piece again, isn't it? So
yeah, aye. So it is as cup, kind of the set pieces, and now they're not kind of analysed just by what happens from that initial delivery. It's second and at times third kind of phases of it where you need to stay alive and stay active, and Hibs just really seem to struggle with that, to be honest with you. I mean, it's you could see it coming almost when that it was a kind of just a playing percentages from Aberdeen after the free kicks blocked, trying to just lob it back into the box towards Miovski, where kind of you've always got you always get a chance when he's kind of sniffing around the box. Hibs don't deal with that. Kind of failing to push up properly after as soon as you see that the player is shaping to just knock that ball in behind, everybody's got to step up as one. They just pointed to a kind of lack of cohesion, and then from there it's Nicky Devlin who obviously reacts first, and it was sort of symptomatic of what I felt was really kind of hesitance in the back line. I felt they looked pretty nervy from the outset. Especially in the central areas. I would maybe excuse Jordan Abita from any of this, because again I thought he had a really solid game, but as far as the others go, there was a bit of trepidation in their performance, and I feel like it was just all around Miovski. I know he didn't score at the weekend, but I still think a lot of the issues were caused by him and the things he does, and sometimes just his mere presence. There was a nervousness whenever the ball was in and around him. Sometimes even when it wasn't, because he's just one of those guys. He can obviously his goal scoring record speaks for itself, but he can do a bit of everything. He can threaten you in behind. He can come and link the play, and he can create things as well in that aspect. And he doesn't give you a moment's peace either. He's a really hard worker, and it just felt like Hibs were kind of really quite wary of the threat that he posed. I think at times they maybe stayed a wee bit too deep when defending, maybe a wee bit hesitant to push up because they know that he can threaten in behind. And Aberdeen were looking for that direct ball constantly, and I think then you've either, if you want to sit deep, okay, maybe that kind of combats that a wee bit, but then I feel like they were kind of being allowed to do it. If you know that a team are going to look for that direct ball, the best way I think to combat it is maybe not to sit deep and bank on yourself to deal with it, but to almost try and cut it out at source. By pressing and stopping guys getting their head up and being able to play that pass, which they were just looking for. At every available opportunity, I felt. And at the end, I think there was a kind of Hibs didn't really do it either particularly well, and I think that's that nervousness kind of just kind of spread throughout the defence as the game was going on. But on the other hand, it was two good goals. I know there's a mistake from the Aberdeen keeper. You could probably argue for the first goal because it's not a great clearance. Jonah just puts it back into an area. And then, as I said there, you've got two guys with great quality who make something happen from that. The second goal, again, I know there's a mistake from Nicky Devlin, but again, it's lovely football. A great run by Joe Newell, picked out by Obita, and then Emiliano Marcondes. Hard name for my West of Scotland dialect to get out. Unfortunately, there's not a many Emilianos from down my way. And it's a great finish. I didn't think it'd take him long to get off the mark in a Hibs shirt, and that was a harder finish than it looked at. I think because it's been cut back at him, and he could have skied it. He got a really clean contact. I don't think it'll be the last time we see him finding it for Hibs, but just overall, it's one that's kind of hard to really make a kind of definitive judgment on, because Hibs really, they need to get 3 points on the board sooner rather than later. It's not a vintage Aberdeen side either, and having already gone up there and won earlier in the season, it shows that they can do it. But at the same time, Pittodrie, the typical, hard place to go, hard place to get a result. It's again, I think on balance, a draw was probably a fair result, and I think again we're not trying to stay away from too much kind of discussion of VAR, but I don't think we can really ignore the flashpoint. Certainly in the first half, you talked about the penalty shout, the penalty non-award involving Nicky Devlin. I think just compare it to some of the incidents this season where I have seen penalties being given. I would even argue, the one that goes against Nectar Triantis in the game against St Mirren. Triantis has conceded a penalty for what I felt was something much less blatant than what that Devlin has there. I think it's one of those where it's not just the ball's not just bounced up or ricocheted randomly. He's not had time to pull his arm out of the way. You can see the cross coming from a fair distance away, and he actually moves his arm towards it. And I think the kind of the feeling when the game was stopped so that they could review it in the VAR room, it felt absolutely inevitable that the referee David Monroe was going to be called over to the monitor to look at it. And I don't know about you, but I was pretty shocked when that the instruction from the VAR room was just to allow play to continue. I thought it was probably as clear a penalty as as you're likely to see.
Yeah, I mean, they've got monitors. Excuse me, they've got monitors in the Pittodrie press box now, so you've got the benefit of being able to see replays kind of straight away. And obviously, we saw it a couple of times after the incident, whilst VAR was looking at it, and you thought, surely they can't not sort of advise that should be a penalty, because it looked like for all the world like kind of stonewaller. And I think the thing for me was you can actually see him trying to like drag his arm out the way, which is usually a kind of surefire admission of guilt, subconsciously or otherwise, that my hand has been or my arm has been in an unnatural position, so I better try and get out of the way and pretend like nothing happened. But I don't know. I mean, it feels like Hibs have been on the sort of wrong end of a lot of these decisions, but both ways, in that there's been potential penalties for Hibs that haven't gone their way, but then they've also conceded penalties that maybe they're not getting similar kind of incidents awarded to themselves, and it just feels a bit. I mean, I kind of believe in the you make your own luck kind of approach, but I'm not really sure what else Hibs could be doing. I mean, it's a great cross from Abita. I mean, you touched on his performance, and I think he has been one of the sort of more consistent performers throughout this sort of run of not great form over the past sort of couple of months. He's been sort of one of the constants. He's been reliable. He's been good performer, especially when he's been moved into central defence against Rangers at the last minute as a kind of stopgap. But a good cross, and it just. I think we're still sitting here a couple of days later, and you think, how is it not given? Like what what in that. It'd be great if we got more of like an explanation about why, or just like comparing it to other incidents and saying, look, this is why this incident was different. Because if we were given that explanation, then I think it becomes easier to understand. And then for us, especially like in the media, then if we can see sort of future situations, future incidents, and you can say, right, well, that's very similar to such and such an incident from this game. So
yeah,
there's a high likelihood of it being given, or actually it's different, so it's probably not going to be given as a penalty. But yeah, it's like I said earlier on, it's one of those decisions that if it goes the right way for Hibs, then things could be very different. And I feel like we've said this a lot. There's been a lot of incidents throughout, I think, this season, and even going back at the last season as well. Lee Johnson certainly sort of talked about it a lot. There have been a lot of incidents that kind of haven't gone Hibs' way, either for or against. In terms of penalties, for instance, and it's obviously hard to take, but at the same time, you can't really rely on VAR like handing you stuff for free. Like Hibs obviously have to be stronger in defence. They have to be better at taking their chances. I think with the influx of players from January, with the likes of Martin Boyle coming back, we are seeing chances getting taken a bit more. Defensively, still, doesn't really matter who is making up the back four. It just doesn't seem to be great. But it's. I mean, obviously, we didn't have VAR until a couple of seasons back, so you can't sort of point to VAR and say VAR is the sort of the reason for Hibs struggles. Obviously, you can't. But it does feel like there's sort of more going against them than going for them. and we've said this before, but it does sort of spoil the game and the enjoyment and everything. Like 3 of the 4 goals on Saturday are checked rigorously by VAR.
Yeah.
Marcondez's equaliser, the Aberdeen fans are giving it away because it's been chopped off, and then after about 3 or 4 minutes, you're then sort of realising that actually no, it's been given, and then think. But it's just one of those things that's you have to imagine that. They say these things even themselves out. I don't know. I don't know whether it's just that sort of season, whether things are just sort of going wrong for Hibs. You look at the injuries, you look at boys being away on international duty, you look at VAR decisions.
Yep.
You name it. But I think I've seen a lot of fans sort of questioning why the club isn't coming out more strongly on this, and certainly Nick Montgomery speaking about it in the aftermath on Saturday. He was very, very kind of, I'm told it's not a penalty, so it's not a penalty, we move on. And he's the kind of guy who doesn't kind of dwell on things. He likes, he prefers to look forward. But I suppose the argument is, if the club does sort of kick up a fuss about it, make a song and dance, what's it actually going to do? It's obviously I think the fans would probably appreciate the club coming out and saying something like, "Oh, we've asked for an explanation about this, we've asked for an explanation about that." Because when they don't, it just looks a little bit like accepting. They're accepting a decision that's gone against them, and they could be doing more about it. But I just think it's what's interesting is the penalty didn't seem to be given. It's not as if the penalty was given by the match referee and then he was overruled. So without VAR, does play continue? Does he give the decision? I would like to understand more about how the influence of having somebody like another referee watching the games is influencing the on-field referee. Because I think it was Derek McInnes actually after the 2-2 draw at Kilmarnock. Obviously talking, favourite Kilmarnock. I think they. I think it was actually a red card rather than a penalty incident, but he felt that the on-field referee had maybe been kind of overruled by a more senior official on VAR duties. So that's interesting. That maybe comes into it, that if you've got a more senior referee on VAR saying this is what I think, because ultimately it's the match referee's call. But very difficult if you've got a more senior official on the other end of the earpiece or whatever saying, actually I don't think it is. Very difficult to sort of say, actually I'm going to go against that. I'm not saying that happens all the time. I'm not saying that's always the case, but that's something that Derek McInnes raised. I think it's an interesting point. Not that I'm comparing the two in any way, but you look at. I think you look at some of these sort of like aeroplane incidents, like whether it's a crash, whether it's a near miss or something, and a lot of the time it's because the sort of less senior co-pilot hasn't felt able to say something to the captain. It's like, well, he's more senior to me, so I can't say anything. So it's obviously like it is a sort of state of mind where you maybe think, I can't say anything because that person's more senior, when actually you want to. So yeah, but the fact that we're sitting here debating what's going on in the referee's head when he's made a VAR decision just kind of illustrates how mad the whole thing is to me. So let's move on.
Yeah, definitely. I know. It's just, again, it's like you don't want to be sitting having discussions over this, but when incidents keep on happening, it's hard to avoid it. I think certainly, for me, I think there have, in general, the past couple of years, VR has resulted in too many of these handball incidents being given. I think there's been so many, kind of stuff that I just, wouldn't buy into being a penalty at all. But again, I think that one was at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where I feel like it was as obvious as it gets. Well, these things happen, I suppose, until next week. So, in terms of, you touched on it earlier on, Hibs kind of getting back into the game on Saturday, and then obviously it gets to 2-2, and you think maybe they'll be in the ascendancy, they'll be the sides who are kind of looking to go and get the winner, and obviously Nick Montgomery's plans for all his substitutions were affected by the fact that he had to take off David Marshall. But you wanted to touch on the fact that it's the second game in a row now that Dylan Vente has been He's been left as an unused substitute, and I think it obviously kind of raises eyebrows in that there was a kind of significant outlay to bring him to the club. There was a sort of significant period of time where there was a feeling that he was being kind of sacrificed almost. Playing a different role where he was, it kept him further away from where he wanted to be. You didn't see him popping up in front of goal all that often. He was playing a lot deeper. So I think there was, when the change of shape comes in, the additional personnel, there was maybe a perception that he's going to get a chance to show what he can do as as the focal point, as the central striker, which is penalty box strikers. That's the kind of reputation that he came to Scottish football with, as in that was the type of player. So I think he possibly somebody who, if you were looking at the change of shape on paper and new guys coming in, he's somebody who I think a lot of people thought might have benefited from it, or at least have gotten a more of a chance to play where he wants to. Now, obviously, Mizzian Malidas came in. Nick Montgomery, he seems to fancy him through the middle, and he's a he's clearly a talent. Clearly brings things to the side. He's made goal contributions since he's came in. I don't think you can doubt that. But I think it was still a wee bit strange, and I think a lot of people picked up on it. A wee bit surprising to not see Vente be involved at all in a game that you thought Hibs were they could have done with somebody coming on to provide a goal threat in the closing stages.
Yeah, definitely. I think you touched on it there. You said about David Marshall's injury. Now maybe that affects planned substitutions. I don't know how much planning they do in terms of substitutions in advance, because we know that Nick Montgomery likes to sort of finish a game strongly. I think you look at rugby where they've got players on the bench. They don't call them subs; they kind of call them finishers, which does sound quite kind of threatening, but also describes quite sort of adequately what they do, and that they come off the game sort of they come off the bench to finish the game strongly for the team they're coming on for. That's the idea. And when you look at the players you're bringing on, so you can bring on Emiliano Marcondes and he can pop up with an equalising goal of that quality. You could bring on people like Luke Amos with his his background in the Championship. Adam Lafondra speaks for itself, and it's obviously it's clear to me that Montgomery and Sergio Raimundo have this approach where and we've touched on this before. We've touched on it in videos. We've done it in articles. It's not just a case of this is our strongest 11, and as soon as some of the boys start tiring, we'll bring on replacements. It's very much like this is the starting 11 we feel is capable of competing for 65, 70 minutes, and we've got a bench which we believe is capable of guys coming off it and impacting the final kind of 15, 20 minutes of a game. And that's something that really I think Hibs were hampered by when they had players on international duty, when players were injured, and before they brought in the 7 January signings. So I think you know that there's always going to be sort of maybe 4 or 5 subs on average a game, and you look at who's starting and you can maybe work out who's coming on, and usually for who as well. For example, if Luke Amos is on the bench, you can be pretty sure that he's going to come on for Nathan Mariah-Welsh or Dylan Levitt with maybe 15-20 minutes to go. You look at if you've got Lafondra on the bench, you've got Dylan Vente on the bench, you think, well, maybe they come on for Mizzian Malidas. Obviously, it was slightly different on Saturday, and Nathan Mariah-Welsh was taken off maybe slightly earlier than we thought he might be. Mm-hmm. And I think Eli Yuan was taken off. Mizani's moved out to the left wing, where to be fair, he's looked good there before, sort of drifting inside. It's where he scored the goal against Kilmarnock from, just sort of out wide and then just sort of coming central and finishing at the top corner. And a sort of similar goal against Inverness as well. And I don't think there's any doubt that at the moment, out of sort of Mizani and Eli Yuan, Mizani is the one who seems to be sort of performing at the moment. Like I know Yuan scored against Inverness, but it was put on a plate for him by Martin Boyle. And I just feel you look back to the St Mirren game, Celtic game, I just wonder whether it's maybe one of those players who's, because he's played so much football, because there hasn't been that many alternatives until recently, he is maybe in that sort of jaded mindset where he actually just needs to be on the bench for a game or two, you bring him on if you have to for like the last 15, 20. But I think, relying on him as a starter is maybe it's a big ask at the moment. I know he's always likely to do something, but if he's not contributing as much as, say Mazzani Maulida, Martin Boyle, then, surely you look at changing things up. And I just wonder whether Dylan Vente's maybe suffered a bit from the same, that he was used a lot throughout I don't know if you call it the sort of injury crisis / international duty sort of month or whatever you want to call it. But, he played a lot of football. He wasn't getting a lot of joy in front of goal because he was being asked to play, deeper or play a slightly different role to accommodate other players. And I just think when you look at what he was doing at Roda in the Netherlands, he was playing as the sort of central striker in a 4-3-3, which, kind of sounds awfully familiar to what Hibs are doing at the moment. And, I don't think Montgomery would come out and explain why he's not been playing at great length. I think he might just say, if he did sort of go into any detail, I think he would probably just say, he picked Maulida because he felt he was the sort of best option for the games, or he might just sort of use he's talked about this before, just this rotation and making sure that players aren't being sort of overused, if you like, to their detriment. But I just sort of feel from what he did in the Netherlands as the sort of focal striker in a front three in a 4-3-3, like, surely, I mean, and okay, obviously not telling Montgomery and Raimundo how to run their team, but I would like to see him given a chance as the sort of, the central striker, the centre forward, maybe Mazzani on the left and Boyle on the right, because that's, you're not weakening your starting 11, in my opinion. I certainly think there was a time when he wasn't really getting much service. When you think about Montgomery coming out and saying, yeah, we didn't create that many chances, and when we did, we didn't take them. But I think you look at Martin Boyle, you look at Mazzani Maulida, you look at the guys in midfield, Joe Newell with another assist at Pittodrie at the second of the season. You've got guys in there who can, create things for an attacker. And, maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe, I mean, for all we know, he could be carrying a slight knock even. Like, we don't really know. But I just sort of feel at the moment that, Nick Montgomery has been quite sort of clear in the past about not wanting players to suffer burnout. He has sort of given them a rest. And I just sort of feel maybe if he was to do the same with Eli Yuan and maybe give like Dylan Vente a chance, put Mazzani out on the left, then, that could benefit him. You've got Yuan to come off the bench. You've still got options. And I just think, the other part of it as well is that, Adam Lafondre's coming back. You need him to get game time. You need him to get up to speed because he's obviously a real sort of boon to have in the squad, with his experience, with his nous, with his sort of, I mean, you look at his role in the third goal against Inverness, it was sort of it was brilliant. Sort of runs for the ball, he's offside, the stop's going, and the defence is just completely flummoxed. Boyle runs onto it, squares it for Yuan to knock it in. It's just, things like that. Hibs need that kind of savvy in the final third. And I think if you look at who they've got, you've got like Martin Boyle's pace, Eli Yuan's unpredictability. Is that a word? I think it is. Mazzani's sort of able to kind of float between that sort of, out on the wing, coming centrally. You've got Dylan Vente, the penalty box striker, and then you've got Adam Lafondre as the kind of savvy, savvy experience in there. And, it's just, I think, obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I look back at the Aberdeen game and I just think, maybe Vente might have been a better option. But at the same time, obviously Lafondre needs minutes because he's been out for so long. You want him to be back fit. There's not been that many reserve games or bounce games for them to, give minutes to him, and like say Chris Cadden, things like that. So it does feel a bit like Montgomery is doing this juggling act at the moment, but it is also at the same time he's saying like points and final place in the league are important for a variety of reasons, and I think you want to give yourself the best opportunity of getting those points. Now nothing against Adam Lafondre, he's already scored against Aberdeen this season at Pittodrie, so maybe there was a little bit of that thinking in mind.
Yep.
Maybe there was just a bit of thinking that his running, his movement could actually create options for the other players on the pitch. But Yeah, I'd be keen if we don't get an explanation from Nick Montgomery this week as to maybe why he's not been bringing Vente on, whether it is just to whether it is a knock, whether it's just to kind of give him some respite, or whether it's just because he feels what he's been going with is the strongest, the strongest sort of setup for those types of games. Then if we do get an explanation, great. If we don't, then we're kind of left in the dark. But I just think it would be worth, even if not for an entire game or for the start, and just sort of seeing how he fares in that front three, which is just like a familiar formation that he's used to playing in. And I just think, with the players he's got around him, Boyle, Melida, Marcondes even, then, I think he could really benefit from that. And if he gets a couple of goals, then, his confidence is going to go right back up. And you've then got sort of 4 or 5 forwards who are itching to get into the starting lineup, itching to come off the bench. And, it doesn't solve the problems that Hibs have in defence, but, it's... it's
I know.
If you've got loads of strikers or loads of attackers who are capable of scoring goals, then you're winning every game 3-2, 4-3. Then you get the 3 points. That's all that really matters.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think it seems like a bit of a strange one. I think it'd be interesting to see if there is a particular reason for it, or whether it's just a case of kind of like rotation. And just kind of taking him out of the firing line a wee bit, because you have seen fans sort of questioning like the amount of money that have spent on him for his return, but at the same time you also see fans saying things like Vente does nothing every game. It's like, well, it's hard to do that if you're man marking at Callum McGregor against Celtic, for instance, or if you're being asked to play as a as a kind of number 10 with a winger ahead of you because there's nobody else. So it might be a victim of circumstance, but I still think he has got a lot to offer, and I just think if he can get his confidence up and maybe get a couple of goals and just see how he links up with his team in his current guys, this 4-3-3, then you could be seeing a lot more from him than we have seen, and I think that would be that would obviously be to his benefit and to the team's benefit as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is quite a turnaround from just a few weeks ago that now we are talking about players who aren't getting any minutes, as opposed to a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the fact that there were hardly any players, full stop. Yeah. So I suppose when a manager does get options into his squad, then there are always going to be 1 or 2 players who are not left with their nose out of joint, but like guys who are going to be victims of that in a way, who are not going to get quite as much game time as perhaps they would have done before. But there's still a long way to go in the season, and I'm sure we will get to see him in this new shape at some point. So could even be this weekend. Who knows? Either way, it's a huge game coming up for Hibs this weekend. Dundee at home. Dundee, obviously, if I'm not mistaken, 5 points ahead of Hibs in the table. I think we try our best. At least we think. I think we do. Kind of steer away from hyperbole and whatnot on these. But I don't think to me, it doesn't feel like an exaggeration to say that this really, really is a must-win game for Hibs and Nick Montgomery on Saturday. Martin Boyle said it himself after the Aberdeen game. They really can't afford to drop many more points, especially not another home defeat or even a draw at home. I think would be pretty damaging to certainly the perception of where this season is heading. It already feels that it is kind of in danger of meandering a bit, and to go from the start of December to what are we now moving towards the last week of February, to have not won in the Premiership. It's not a great record, especially kind of looking at how poor Hibs were, in the game against St Mirren. I know they were much improved falling against Celtic, but I think it is just a game where I think by any means necessary, Hibs need to find a way to come away with maximum return from this, because I don't think they can can't afford to drop any further away from the top 6. I know there's it's a kind of strange. Again, it's the strangeness of this league, that a lot of teams, they're not going to run away from you. in a short space of time, because there's a lot of sides in this division who don't put any great significant run of results together. It's all kind of bitty mostly across the board in terms of who picks up wins. But Hibs have been, as I say, kind of really struggling for that victory for such a long time now, that to then end up so far behind a team like Dundee as we move into the latter stages of the season, it would be really damaging, I think, for this group and for the manager, who is obviously still trying to reshape this team from the January transfer window. And I completely agree that there have been signs in some of the performances that there is at least the kind of potential for it to click at some point. I think it's not any surprise that Hibs are now scoring more goals with the amount of attacking talent they've got in the team. But obviously the goals conceded have been and continue to be really the most significant problem. So it just feels like so far past time that they produce a performance in the league that brings it all together. Convincing in their play and how they go about the game, and obviously the all important getting a result, getting a win at home, just for morale, just to try and build a wee bit of momentum, because the longer it goes on, the more difficult it becomes to get yourself out of this winless rut, because it affects players psychologically, it affects the fans, it becomes a hard situation to pull yourself out of. And I think just kind of all that pulled together, it's Saturday is the kind of, I think it's the definition of a must win for Hibs.
Yeah, it's a huge game. I mean, Nick Montgomery said this before the Aberdeen game. He said they're all big games, and he's right.
Yeah,
they are all big games, and Hibs are in a position where I mean it's a tough one, I think, because you look at the targets that Hibs sort of set themselves as a club at the start of each season, which is basically to go deep in both cup competitions and sort of finish third, fourth, qualify for Europe, that sort of thing. And it feels a little bit like last season, obviously poor performance in both cups out in the early stages, but still qualify for Europe. Admittedly, a little bit kind of backdoor like, but still qualify for Europe. Do it by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
And then this season, semi-finals in one cup, and probably on reflection, unlucky not to make it to the final, and at the very least quarterfinals of the other cup. But league performance leaving a lot to be desired, and I don't really think there's many Hibs fans who are kind of talking about Europe anymore, which I think sort of tells
a story.
It does, yeah. And I mean, stranger things have happened. I think we saw last season that Hearts just had that little wobble, and for it to go down to the sort of final day of the season when they looked to be so sort of clear in third for so long, and then Aberdeen sort of coming out of nowhere, to kind of beat them to that spot, and then obviously going down to the last day against Hibs to ensure they didn't finish fifth. So anything can happen in this league, I think. More recently, we've seen results. I mean, Livingston beating St Mirren. I don't think too many people saw that happening. Hearts obviously getting a result at Celtic a few weeks back. Again, probably a surprising one. Even Kilmarnock at the weekend. It's not. Don't think you can look at too many of these games, and I know there's going to be quite a few Hibs fans who are watching this and saying, "Oh, well, you can always tell the team's going to be Hibs," and I get it, yeah. If there's an exception, it'll be Hibs, but I just think this is the kind of league where anything can happen, and you just think if Hibs can get 3 points against Dundee, and they can do it with a sort of commanded performance, not a kind of backs to the wall, hanging on by the fingernails, 1-0, like they did against Livingston in December, like they did in other games where they're sort of hanging on. If it could be a commanded performance and, one where, there's been good performances across the park, defensively strong, cohesion up front, boss in the midfield, then it's obviously good on, it's good for the 3 points. It's good for confidence. It's good for league position. It's good for Montgomery, and it's also good, you would imagine, going into a derby at Tynecastle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, you're saying it's a big game, and it is for all those reasons and so many more. Because I think, there does seem to be a kind of assumption that, Hibs are prepared to give Montgomery time. He's obviously was given the January transfer window. He was well back to a certain extent and being able to bring in 7 new players and sort of obviously signing the likes of Luke Amos and Nathan Mariah-Welch for permanent deals. And, I think it does look like he is going to get that sort of rare thing that managers don't really get in modern football, which is time. We're recording this not long after Michael Beale got the boot at Sunderland after 12 games, which, just sort of tells you how sort of short-lived managerial careers at the moment can be, and we've seen it at Hibs in recent seasons as well. Sean Maloney lasting 4 months. Lee Johnson lasting a little over a year, and I think it's good to finally see a manager getting time to sort of get his ideas across to the players and to just get an identity back into Hibs, which is something they've lacked for quite a long time. But at the same time, that sort of 3 points from 24 is starting to look really, really bad.
There's no getting away from it now, really, is there?
There's not, and all manner of kind of optimism and you need a couple of transfer windows, or it'll all click together soon. It's all well and good saying that, but it's ultimately not going to be the case. I mean, it's a results business. You have to get results, and for a club like Hibs, you have to be performing at the level that you should be. And at the moment, they're not. Collectively, individually, whatever you want to call it. And I just think that I don't think the size or the magnitude of Saturday's game can be understated or overstated. I just think it is another big game in a run of what are all going to be big games, but this one feels particularly significant, and especially given that Hibs beat Dundee last time out at Dens Park. They should have beaten them at Easter Road earlier in the season, and obviously league placings tell a story, but it doesn't also tell you about when you've had sort of umpteen shots on goal but haven't taken any of the chances. It doesn't tell you about VAR decisions going against you, that sort of thing. So I think the best thing Hibs can do to try and avoid any more kind of hard luck stories, any more of this sort of this happened but we move on. Just go out there, get 3 points, put in a performance, and I just think it would do wonders for everyone and everything connected with the club. And I think the other thing as well is that Dundee will be well aware of that. Dundee will know that Tony Dockett has been, I think, really, really quite impressive in his, leading Dundee this season. So, I think they'll be up for it as well. They know what's at stake. They're obviously, they're out to try and consolidate their position as well. So, it's obviously not going to be a gimme. It's not going to be, it's not going to be sort of, obviously there are no easy games, but it's not going to be straightforward for Hibs. And, maybe having that sort of facing them is actually going to help, rather than it just being this, expected to beat this team, expected to beat that team. I think there will be a little bit of, Dundee are playing well, and this won't be a walk in the park. So that could actually bring out, a little bit more from Hibs, which I think ultimately is what they need.
Yeah, definitely. 3 points seems to be a non-negotiable for this coming Saturday. But we're going to leave it there for now. As if we'll be back later on in the week to preview the Dundee game in more detail. If I can just give another quick plug to our new Hibs Observer app before we head off this evening. You can. There's an article on the website that gives you full details of how to access it and what it gives you. It is well worth checking out if you are a subscriber. And it's definitely the best way to access our content moving forward. And then just as well, if you're watching us on YouTube, if you would be tempted at all to hit the subscribe button, that really, really does help us in terms of being able to keep bringing you these videos. You'll probably be able to tell I'm not a natural salesman, but I'm imploring you to give us a wee hit on that subscribe button, because it does mean a lot to us in terms of support and keeping on bringing you the videos and the content. But yeah, we'll leave it there for today. Keep an eye on the website for more build up to Saturday's game, plus lots of other things along the way. And yeah, as always, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you again next time.